So you said that before we started rolling the cameras that you were the underground guy for like 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Now you're the front and center guy.
Yeah.
When did that happen?
When I got hurt.
Gotcha.
I don't know if you know that story, and I don't really love to tell that story, but December 2013, I was crippled. How about that? I was in a crippling accident, and it caused me to change everything because literally it changed everything.
What happened? If you don't mind, you don't have to, but
I'll give you a very condensed version.
Sure.
I was training with a friend of mine who is a pro wrestler. Not that makes him a bad egg, but that makes him tall. And we squatted, and I think we did. It was a goofy workout. I think we actually deadlifted, then squatted, and we were finishing up with some leg presses. And it was an old leg press, one that I actually like, but to rack the sled in the low position was lowish for me and impossible for him. And to rack the sled in the top position was borderline impossible for me. So it was kind of not the piece of equipment we should have been using, but we did. And because I was stronger than him and probably a little more reckless than him, we would rack it in the top position, and I would have to basically do a ballistic repetition and slap the handles in. And that worked until it didn't. And I was fully extended, toes all out in like plie position, and the handle slapped in and then slapped out. And whatever it was, fucking 1,100 pounds or some nonsense, just came straight down, and my feet basically just rolled up. And I broke, literally, when I say this, people think I'm being hyperbolic, but I'm not. This is a genuine statement. I broke every bone in both of my feet.
Fuck.
And, mayhem from there. Was told, the surgeon was actually the ER surgeon, who did the surgery. It was actually an acquaintance of mine, and he told me basically just preparatory. He's like, you're probably not going to walk again. And he said, if you do, you're going to walk with a severe limp. So that was how my 2014 started, was wheelchair bound.
And then does that propel into your question? So after that, something happened?
Well, I mean, that changed everything because I was no longer, competitive. I was no longer mobile. I was no longer a lot of things. At the time, I had no idea how long I was even going to be in a wheelchair. It wound up being about 9 months. So, I basically had to start. I don't even want to say I was so clever. It's like I had to build infrastructure from this chair. I had to fucking basically fill my fucking hours. Like, you can only do so many fucking wheelies in the living room, and then you're like, well, maybe it's time to fucking do something. And that led me to, the podcasting, and that's, of course, a public thing, sort of. You're sitting there talking to a phone, but potentially thousands or tens of thousands of people see it, and that's what led me down the road of kind of having a public face to kind of answer the question you asked.
Yeah, because you are unrelenting with your social media, podcasts, video content. You've been doing it for a long time, right? So did that injury sort of was that concurrent with when you started that process?
That completely started it. Yeah. I did nothing prior to that. I had nothing, but very shockingly little. Prior to 2013, only people that needed to know who I was knew who I was.
Yeah. Did that injury propel you with any of your injury research? Because that's something I wanted to touch base on today. I think I've heard you talk before about growth hormone and healing peptides, and I think it's really eloquent. And I was telling Alex I would love to just kind of get you to run us through that today. But did you getting that injury? Did that head you down that path?
Well, I mean, no, further for sure, in a much more precise and concise and crash course, manifestation. Osteo development isn't the burning need on most athletes' plates, so it's something I knew about as a topic, but did I know about it in detail? No. Soft tissue, yes, that's considerably more relevant to powerlifters, throwers, etc., American football players. So, that was definitely an area that I had knowledge, but then, much like, my wife recently had a bout of cancer, and it was just that same sort of thing where I'm like, I'll be back, and I go to the library and take every book they have on cancer and read them front to back 4 times over and, start a stack of notes. And within, 4 weeks, I'm asking the oncologist questions that they don't have answers to. So that's just how I operate, unfortunately. I have a very vast capacity for learning, but a relatively narrow interest if left alone. If that isn't...
You need a prompt of a sort.
An impetus for sure.
I want to get back to that question, but that question on learning is really important because you seem obsessive in the way you learn, and I wonder if that's just a natural thing, because learning is so important, and how you learn and how you communicate your learnings. Is there anything you would pass on to strategies, techniques, things that you have done to almost, like PED steroid your learning capacity?
Well, those exist, by the way.
Please share.
No, I'm not even being facetious.
Like, cognition and
100%.
memory. Yeah.
It's a subject that I don't love to love. Good friend of mine, Alex Kiekel, and Andrew Triana, both are considerably more obsessed. Actually, they are obsessed with it. I actually kind of shit on it as a rule. But those sorts of drugs certainly exist. Caffeine has a certain psychoactive capacity. Stepping up that, you can move into modafinil, ardafinil, fluorinated modafinil. Then there's actual neurologically upregulatory peptides like Celank and Cmax, and there's loads of things that can improve the way the brain works. The problem is they need to be paired very, very carefully with strategies, much like steroids. Steroids work, but if you just sit around and take steroids, they work poorly. But paired with the proper variety of training, they work better and better and better. And if your training, your nutrition, and your drug use is very precise, you get very precise outcomes. People can run 100 meters in 9.5 seconds. The problem with the learning peptides is most people are shit, practice shit, and then take drugs to learn shit.
Right.
And it's zero benefit, if any benefit at all. It might be negative.
So let's go back then to not learn like shit, to build a foundation of good learning capacity. Do you have anything that you would say?
I have a way. Yeah. Is it the way, a best way? Is that I don't know. I have a methodology. Again, I hate to even talk about this shit, but I really do. I find it awkward and but I sit here before you, as a public speaker, almost no one knows this, but I was born with a hideous speech impediment. I could not speak.
Really?
100%. I struggled terribly to speak. And I was raised by my grandparents, who were wonderful people, but they were ignorant. They were just old and uneducated and they weren't part of the modern world in the 1970s, much less any other time. And I had one decent thought on the topic outside of frustration, and that was people on the radio get paid to talk. They must be kind of good at it. And from that childlike thought, I basically gave myself speech pathology by sitting in their basement in front of this giant tube radio with a horsehair front, listening to the only thing that it would get in terms of reception, which was PBS, which I don't know if it's here, but in America, PBS is rebroadcast from the UK. So I'm sitting in a basement in my German-speaking grandparents' home, listening to British diction, British language, trying to fucking repeat it. And horribly at first, and better over time. And so the process of learning was an absolute necessity to me. It wasn't something that I had an option. I had to learn how to do this. And so learning was just a thing that became very, very just religious and dogmatic and something else. And I hate to be like that old guy. I don't ever want to be that old, like get off of my lawn guy. But it occurred to me very early that learning's hard. It's fucking hard. You have to. It's a job. You have to do it. It's not a thing that just not fucking osmosis that it just enters your head. You have to do it. And so I approach it in that fashion. It's a thing that I do. It's part of my job. If not, it is my job. It went from learning to speak to learning to have something to fucking speak about. And that's how I do. On a base level. Now, like, I could show you my notes and things. I have a way of learning that I've developed, was nudged along by some professors and things, that if I had to name it, and I don't like naming things, but I've actually said this to my assistant and others, that I think of my way of learning as distillation. I take gross, giant pieces of information, and I weed out all the shit that I think is not important, and then I have something more concise, and I ignore it for a bit. Then I come back and I take out what I think is still extraneous, and I just consistently ignore, distill until I get it down to a fucking Post-it note. And I'm like, oh, that's gold. And then I stick it over here.
Okay.
And then I go on to the next batch of shit, and I do that.
From complex to simple.
Yeah, and it's just a constant state of distilling till I have just all these Post-it notes that literally could wind up as a book titled Post-it Note Nutrition, which I have written.
Yeah, which you've got.
That's a plug.
No, it's not. It's not really a plug.
No,
it's
good
just
in a good way.
It's just an explanation.
Solve the
I
problem.
got to that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that is probably a meandering way to answer the things you asked.
It answered it. Thank you. But I want to hear. I want to hear about these peptides for healing soft tissue injuries.
Yeah, well, I mean, so after you got injured, like you said, it's different type of injury than what we're sort of like seeing and dealing with more often than not. But you've, as I sort of mentioned before, you've spoken about these a lot, and I think the way that you do it is very eloquent. You know what I mean? So, like, maybe for the benefit of Alex over here, could you run us through, like, just maybe some of the, the way that the growth hormone, for instance, works in the body, and BPC 157, TB 500, like, just gives a bit of an overview of what that might look like from an injury healing perspective.
Were you like a mechanistic?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing that people need to understand is each one of these things have their own mechanism. And I'll briefly touch that. But the more important thing is nothing within you is an isolated consideration. That's the problem people run into with steroids, with anything, even with diet. There is no one thing because everything plays on another thing. And every time you move one thing, 5 other things in the background move subtly. And if they move subtly enough times, they could be somewhere wildly different than where you think they are. It's not this sort of thing like a mixing board where you can just set a setting and then ignore it until you choose to change it. Imagine if you had this giant mixing board of knobs and dials, and every time you turned this one, 5 others unknown to you moved a little bit. Now, how hard would that be to manipulate? So that's what you have to understand in the bigger picture. These people that give you these finite, this is the answer, they're fucking lying or wrong or both.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's the answer. And I will tell them so. Anyone who stands on a box and gives you a finite. Now, is that an excuse to just be wishy-washy? No, but you have to know the bounds of your bounds. So, now, the reason I bring up how interplayed they are is they are, in fact, interplayed. And each one has its own mechanism of action. But if you can tier them correctly, the mechanisms of action overlay in a beneficial format. And the master item in that conversation is growth hormone. Interestingly to the name, and I point this out every time I lecture, growth hormone's name has been changed. It was not originally called growth hormone because it really doesn't do growth. It was called somatropic hormone, which is more indicative of hormone produced in the brain during sleep, which is pretty much what it fucking is. I don't know exactly why the names were changed. Probably because of childhood fetal development is ultimately the response for the osteogrowth. But anyway. But when growth hormone is administered, whether it's endogenous or exogenous, most of what it does, if not all of what it initially does, is not growth, but preparatory. It communicates with tissues and makes them more receptive in some way, depending on the tissue, for future plasticity changes. So if you have a muscle surface or a connective tissue or something, growth hormone comes along and communicates and in some way prepares it for growth. In the case of muscle, it upregulates stem cells and satellite cells and nuclei and gets them very prepared for future growth. It's like having site work done on a construction site. It does the site work, didn't build shit,
Right.
but it put up the little fence and it got everything ready for the workers to arrive. And as unimportant and uninteresting as that sounds, try and build something on an unprepared surface. It's actually impossible. So it's really the fundamental thing. So you need to have this baseline of growth hormone is in play, it's doing its thing. And then, unfortunately, now you have a secondary player to growth hormone, which is kind of growth hormone's metabolic helper, which is insulin, which needs to be in play, whether it's driven through food or exogenous. So the two of them have a synergy to get their shit done. Then once their shit's done and you have these prepared surfaces and growth-ready tissue surfaces, now you can individually target the tissues for the variety of growth you want by applying, IGF-1, MGF, there's multiple mechanogrowth factors. There's, and then TB500 and BPC, which are slightly different but still similar, and they need that preparatory action. But the whole recovery peptide thing is actually really vast. For instance, a mechano growth factor would sort of, if you think of muscle as a chicken wire lattice with dense plaster on it, the chicken wire is the reticulin, elastin, structural, rough endoplasmic reticulum, all that shit. Mechanogrowth factor can actually stimulate the growth of that. So now it's not really healing a tissue, but it's reinforcing the structure that you're constantly building on and making bigger. So there's like layers and layers to this. There's preparatory recovery, there's post-damage recovery, there's post-exercise recovery. There's all these layers, if that matters.
Yeah, and I've heard you speak about it before. Like you mentioned before about like whether we're driving insulin through endogenous or exogenous, and this kind of like goes to play with like just the calorie content, I suppose, during this period. Like it would obviously be something which, if you were relying upon that endogenously, like we wouldn't be thinking about being in big deficits whilst trying to make this recovery.
Right. Absolutely. You again, think about childhood. Do children grow well if they're starved? As stupid and obvious as that statement is, it fucking parlays right through all of things. Truncate developmental energy, you truncate overall growth, height, body mass, etc. Doesn't play any different. The magnitude of surplus maybe isn't quite so significant, but nonetheless, the principles are exactly the same.
Do you have a bit of insights into that magnitude, like of surplus? Like, do you sort of have that conversation with the,
I had that conversation endlessly, and everyone walks away from that conversation frustrated because they want an answer, and there isn't. The answer is dependent on age, race, sex, how far above baseline that individual is, how, just because of conditions, how plastic that individual remains.
Yeah.
Homeostasis is a very, very powerful thing, and if you fall into too deep a level of it, you lose a level of biological plasticity.
Yeah, look, I can tell you, like even like with my experiences with clients, like a lot of the time you'll have someone who is in some kind of preparation phase where perhaps they've got a show or some event on and they really need to be in this caloric deficit, but they've got this injury they're dealing with, and there's kind of like this immovable event.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, we're going to rub it up against reality. Like what can we do? And we're just going to do what we can. And then another one, and this is probably maybe a little bit more with Gen Pop than athletes, is if you're injured, you don't get to do a lot of training. You don't get to do a lot of training. You don't want to get fat. And so they're kind of like fighting this, request to increase calories to heal. Go, listen, you're just going to have to bite the bullet here and realize if we're going to recover from this, we need a certain amount of time allocated towards recovery. Right. And you need to take that idea of like staying thick skin lean right now and just, put it off to the side.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, that brings up a whole separate conversation that, again, I don't even like to have. But I really briefly, I'd say most people's both expectations and realities are so wildly removed from one another. I think most Gen Pop people are way too fat. Most bodybuilders are way too lean, and they're just the realities are so separated. It's just not even a conversation I like to have.
Yeah. Do you think that's a divergence that you've seen get worse over time? You know, with these expectation versus reality.
I don't know, because I don't pay attention. I don't care. Yeah. I don't talk to regular people. That's the thing. People always bring up Gen Pop, and I'm like, who are these fucking people? And why do you even care about them? I don't know, and I don't want more relevant. I don't want to know. Yeah. I think they would just cloud up my worldview.
Yeah. But the context for you, for those listening, who are mostly Gen Pop, your context is athletes, right? No.
My context. Personally, my interest personally is the motivated. I don't care if you compete in the Olympics.
Gen Pop can be motivated.
Chance around your fucking house. It's the people you're talking about are not motivated. I'm talking about people that would fucking knife their uncle to get where they want to be. I'm talking about people that are motivated.
Okay.
People that will walk 15 fucking miles in the rain to get to the gym to do the hard shit I'm telling them to do. That's fucking motivated. Not I have $100, tell me what to do. No. Fuck, I'll kick those people down the stairs. Fuck that.
As you should.
Fuck.
Fair enough. Okay, so you delineate the difference between Gen Pop and just the savages, the people who are fully committed and dedicated to the goal and the outcome. So to go back a little bit, to go growth hormone, is there a minimalist and maximalist approach you have, or you don't even think that way? It's just you need to do this in order to repair this soft tissue injury, this or nothing.
No, that's a terrible way to look at it. And people love to do that. People love, what do IFBB pros take? And I'm like, why do you care? That's like asking how much antibiotic does the guy dying of tuberculosis need? Well, like, what are you planning on getting tuberculosis? Like, why do you fucking care? Like, you need the amount you need. And that's it. That's how drugs work. You need the amount you need. So it's a case by case. It's based on body mass, magnitude of injury, magnitude of vestment. There are people out there that can literally get everything they need out of one IU. And then there's literally people that cannot buy enough growth hormone to accomplish their fucking goals. It's how much you need. I mean, the joke around the office is growth hormone falls under the hookers and lawyers clause in most athletes' contracts. And that clause literally is more is always better, more is always more fun, more always gives you a better outcome, and more is always expensive, and more always requires more lawyers. That's what that clause says.
Same applies for drugs.
As a rule.
Right. And then as you age, I wanted to ask you, Broderick, how do you think about the trade-off between dosages, compounds, as you age, and longevity, if you care about it, or quality of life?
Again, this begs me to tell a story that, again, I don't really want to tell, but I started using drugs at age 16. I was exposed to them essentially from day one. So from age 10 to age 16, I knew this was a thing. I knew very roughly what it cost in an ever-growing sense. But from day one, I knew it was a thing. I knew it was a dangerous thing. I knew it was almost certainly in my future, that sort of thing. At age 16, I literally looked in a bathroom mirror and spoke aloud a deal to the devil. And I literally said, if I take these things, travel the world, lift weights, do all the shit I want to do, and can live to 40, that's a fair trade. And I basically shook on that. I turned 51 yesterday. Every single day when I wake up, if I am able to fucking sleep, which usually I'm not, every single morning when I wake up, my first reaction is,
Fuck. You're just cheating life.
So,
Yeah.
Again, that's not the response people expect. They expect, a certain repentance, and I have none. Not a fucking drop.
So I got to ask you then, because like at 16, that was a while ago, man, and it wasn't like you had access to information like you have now. Like, how did you have the sense about you to make that deal? Do you know what I mean? Knowing the implications, or was it kind of guesswork back then?
Because it's still guesswork now. Let's be fucking
I'm
honest.
10 years younger than you, right? So I'm 41, and like when I look back to like my early 20s and like looking at researching into steroids and drugs, admittedly, I didn't know anyone from that world, right? So I didn't have any kind of like anecdotes to come off of. I wouldn't have had the sense to know of the full implications to make a deal like that. But obviously,
there's a story-ish there. One, I had very good, possibly the gayest term that's lodged in my head. I had very good mentorship. I had very, very advanced, very, very intelligent, very, very interested parties around me that were able to offer me insights. And then secondly, the conversation we started with, to me, learning was a fucking job.
Yeah.
At age 12, I literally walked, I don't think I'm being hyperbolic, 3-4 kilometers to the bus station. Got on a bus, took the bus into the city, went from the city and walked and fucking wandered and fucking found a building called a library, and went into the library and found a big fucking box with meter-long drawers with little fucking cards, and ruffled through the fucking cards to find the card that represented the book that maybe they had, that maybe had all its pieces and pages, and maybe had the fucking information I wanted. And then I'd leave with a fucking bundle of fucking paper under my arms and go home and read this shit and make notes, furious fucking notes. And then it was on a clock because I had to take them back in a certain amount of time and make the fucking pilgrimage back to the fucking building. And give them to this fucking curmudgeon old bitchy woman that was mad that I wanted books about fucking steroids. And that was my job.
Yep.
My job was to go to school and suffer through the idiots at school, and then get home and read, and then leave. And then I got to leave there and go lift weights. And then I would come back and I would fucking read. And that was my job. And that was my purpose. And this is the part that confounds everybody. And it wasn't because I wanted to grow up and be a guru or be a fucking internet celebrity or any of that shit. It's because I wanted to fucking know there was shit out there that I didn't know, and that made me mad. That made me that made me furious. That's the whole reason I went to college, is because they knew the shit I needed to know. I didn't want to put up with their liberal, floppy dick, annoying fucking personalities and fucking wander their idiot halls. It was like a fucking cabal. They had the shit, and I had to get it. Sorry.
That is the secret sauce for learning.
Yeah, no, that really is.
That is.
One of the first things, the frustration, that emotion, the anger of not being good enough and not knowing enough.
See, he had that, I had floppy disks, and you had like USBs, man. Just, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So back in my day, I had floppy disks at least at the uni.
It's just a different mode, but the emotion of not being good enough or not being smart enough or not being furious about your own ignorance is there.
So like, can we take like that is like so much experience, right? So much time under your belt doing all of this, and like this thirst for that knowledge that you're talking about. Can I ask you something like more specific in regards to like, let's say expectations that people have around the conversation of fertility? Because that's a big one when people are considering like steroids and things like that. Like, what's been your experience of like the myth or the stuff that's kind of passed around versus the reality of what you see for males and females?
It's hard to buy. Infertility is hard to buy. Again, I don't want to belittle the rare individual that has that problem, because that's a terrible, horrible problem. Apparently, a very emotional, disrupting. It's awful. I'm told. But I'm not by any stretch a paper waver. I'm not one of these people that looks up a paper and like, oh, look what I found. But there is a certain utility in looking at established statistics. What is the incidence of infertility in Gen Pop? Happens to be about 10%. That just is the number. It's just like being left-handed. It's about 15%. That seems to be the number baked into the fucking human genome. About 10% of people have low to infertility. You know what it is in athletics? Any guess?
About the same.
A little less.
Yeah.
About 8-9%.
Yeah.
So, know what athletes do? They take steroids. So is steroids causing infertility? Doesn't look like it.
Yeah. Look, in my experience, and it goes back to what you said before about like making that deal with the devil when you were young. Like when I go back to my high school and even coming out of high school into uni, my early 20s, if I was to think of steroids, the number one thing that we got like entrained, I suppose, was infertility, you know? And then as of, you know, the decades have passed and like, you know, seeing people use, I don't see it to the extent that like of like, you know, the worry and concern that was allocated there.
Name me an IFBB probe that doesn't have children.
Huh.
Name me one that doesn't have way more fucking children than they want. Yeah?
I don't know. I don't know if that's a selection bias. You would know. You would really know, but I just want to be super like.
Again, I tell
honest.
people all the time, I'm like, don't take my word for this shit. Go do your own research. But
okay.
that's the statement.
Are there any other myths or like common misconceptions? There are probably heaps maybe in your brain, but is there any that pop into mind like infertility that you think need to be smashed?
It's not for me to do. Like, I don't give a fuck what. Like, that people always, well, like, what do you think about so-and-so saying that, whatever? And I'm like, you're asking me to explain to you why a dumb person thinks a dumb thing? Like, what the fuck is that? Like, how like, I don't mean this as an insult to you, but that's an insulting question.
No, I understand.
Like,
You're a different thinker.
I don't possess the ability to think like an idiot.
Yeah.
Nor do I ever want to develop that. Like, I just don't care how stupid people think or, you know, and there's probably a body of people somewhere off at fucking Cambridge or whatever that think I'm stupid and cool. I don't want them to try and think down to my level. That's not, it should be an upward trend, not downward. But to what you said with people that, you know, come to you with concerns about fertility or whatever, I see that as the kind of grabbing the snake from the wrong end. I think that's the wrong problem. The problem is a lack of commitment. Do you or do you not want this thing, whatever this thing is, this shiny object? Do you or do you not want it? If you want it enough, you'll shut up about infertility. You'll shut up about erectile dysfunction. It's not saying I want you to have it. It's saying that if the thing is shiny enough, you'll go ahead. If it's not, shut the fuck up and move on to the next endeavor. Buy golf clubs and get the fuck out of my sphere.
Yeah. For me, like, it's a case of like, and this is why, like, maybe I think like as we've gone through time and we've got more access to information, that I think people now think that they could find the right person who's got like the tricks or the secret, or pay enough money to kind of get out of, you know, get through this without like you're paying the price of doing business. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Oh no, I completely believe that, and they're wrong.
Yeah,
they're universally wrong. I get that all the time. Like, what's the safe way to take steroids? I'm like, take up golf. That's the safe way to take steroids.
Yeah.
And there are gurus out there that are basically making their bones on selling the safest way to do drugs. And I'm sorry, but I believe that is a unicorn. I don't believe that is a thing.
Yeah.
And more importantly, I don't think that should be a thing. If something doesn't have a risk, it doesn't have value.
So when I had one of my athletes ask me this, we're working with, he asked about, you talk about the commitment. It's a general question that you might want a lot more nuance for, but recovery days where you're not pushing, you're not causing a big stress to the body. Mm-hmm. How needed are there, in a general sense, this is a question I got, for people on PEDs to supercompensate and recover, or can you just, no, they're not really needed. The point of PEDs is to push the rate limiter and train every day. How do you think about that? How would you answer that?
I would answer that as that's a crap question.
I'm good at asking those with you.
That's how I would answer that. That's just a terrible question.
Well, that's a question I got. What's a better question?
We understand, theoretically, Hand-Selye gas general adaptation.
Sure.
We know that there's a stress, a response, and a recovery. So now you're asking me how necessary is rest. There's a check mark. There's stress, and then there's recovery. There's a check mark. The width or narrowness of that check mark is dependent on the magnitude of the stress. It's not how hard you train, it's simply the magnitude of the stress. So it's like the squat every day versus the squat every week versus myself who squats every fucking 3 weeks. It's the magnitude of the stress requires a necessary length of commensurate check mark. So how often you rest is dependent on exactly how acute the stress is and what level of recovery you have to combat it. Now, what I think you're asking under your breath or around a corner is, can you take enough drugs to overcome almost all rest periods? The answer is yes. But the answer is, can you survive that drug use for long? The answer is no. Again, it comes down to, this is something that I homeschool my children. I'm done actually. They're all graduated, but I've homeschooled all 3 of my children, and this is one of the tools that I've offered them, which I think is very valuable. Whenever you run into a roadblock when you're thinking of whatever you're doing, try to move it laterally to something that's similar but sufficiently different that you're not confused. Okay, so take that Hand-Selye check mark, and I'm talking about training, I'm talking about intensity and frequency, and fuck, I'm clouded. Move it over here. What else follows the Hand-Selye check mark? And you look, well, sun tanning. There's a stress, my skin gets sore, and then there's a recovery. And then you start thinking, well, that means, yes, if I'm out in the sun for 8 hours, I need 2 days off. If I'm out in the sun for 4 hours, I only need a day off. And you can start to see it's an inverse proportion to how long I'm in the sun versus how long I'm out of the sun. And once you start to see that relationship, you can just move it back into your problem. And then that also has interesting implications with the assholes that do I'm not sore. I did your workout, I'm not sore. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? The best way to get a suntan is to not get a sunburn.
Yeah.
And in the kind of racial equivalent of drug use, the darker your skin, the greater your drug use in that particular thing, the more frequency you can tolerate in the sun. And the more fucking albino you are, the worse it is. And interesting, we have drugs. We can give the fucking albino to give them more response like the darker skinned person. Again, it's just like I said, it's not, I understand your desire to answer that question, or your desire to be able to relay that information to athletes, but the problem is it's just too childlike of a question. It needs that context of there's 2 operators here. There's magnitude of stress and duration of recovery, and they're linearly equated at an axial point.
That's good. Thank you. Are there markers for recovery that you look at for you or your athletes that tell them the signal that you're doing a good job, you can keep pushing? Whether it's HRV, resting heart rate, whether it's a volume landmarks.
Depends wildly on the variety of athlete.
Is there a consistency, like a principle?
What you're thinking about, is your squat going up? Is your bench press going up? Is your arm circumference going up? Those things? No. And even heart rate and blood pressure? No, because some sports, the goal is to drive them considerably lower over time. Your goal is, you're running marathons. You want to have ever lower resting heart rate, ever lower blood pressure, ever lower waking glucose. That's all the shit you want. However, if you're driving someone to an acute point, you don't want to see those things happening, because that's proof that you're not driving them to an acute point. Something that most people don't equate, but every government around the world has a military, roughly speaking. And every government has a military, and every military has a basic training. And if you notice, it's not gentle. It's not friendly. It's not full of rest days and recovery days. They're driving you to an acute point. They are intentionally driving you to less and less sleep, higher and higher blood pressure, higher and higher heart rates. They're driving you toward a breaking point for a number of reasons. One, sorting. And two, because only at that level of acute stress can you actually accomplish anything of any value. Lazy, fat, well-fed people aren't wildly effective. People at the edge of their fucking wits, they get shit done. Or don't, which is part of the sorting mechanism. That's base biology.
You mentioned your children for Ben has 2.
Oh man, I've struggled to like go past when you said you homeschooled your kids.
Yeah, all right.
I'm still stuck there. I got so many questions on that.
Yeah.
Are your kids? You mean you finished? Are they like adolescents? Are they sort of like young adults
my
now?
oldest is 32. My middle is 20, and my youngest is about to be 18.
And you homeschooled them all?
Yeah, 100%. None of them saw any public school.
Were you a teacher previously though?
No.
No, I thought I remember that. Okay.
No, I despise teachers.
Oh, okay.
I have a very, very low opinion of people in the educational field.
Yeah. Was that a driving sort of decider for homeschooling?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah, 100%. My wife literally worked in the prison system. My wife was a prison guard for 10 years. And my wife attended the same high school I did. And my wife actually said to me these words. She said, I would feel better about sending our children to the prison for 8 hours a day than to the local school.
That's a big time span as well. So from a 32-year-old down to an 18-year-old, you said? Homeschooled. You. Whoa. Well, you must have picked up a thing or two about like learning and teaching in that time just with them, right? And how that's changed across that time.
People ask that ask that, and I don't actually think so. I approached homeschooling the same way I approach coaching athletes, and that is, what are you trying to make? Again, when I do periodization, there's literally a bracket across the top that says what that is. That's hypertrophy, that's strength, that's skill acquisition, that's ball catching, that's whatever the fuck it is. You know, if it's bodybuilding, this is prancing around in your underwear. There's a title to the top of the fucking page. What are you trying to make when you're educating kids? What are you trying to make? Decent, effective, survivable humans. How fucking hard is that? People act like it's like this. Teachers act like they're saving the fucking universe. Like, really teaching people not to fucking kill, pillage, and steal. Teaching them to fucking read and write. Teach them how to balance a checkbook and operate the devices in their home. What? That ought to take 20, 30 minutes a day. I'm dumbfounded at how people act like this is like the cosmological savior. To make decent people? 1,000 years ago, people did that in a fucking cave by firelight while eating rats. And now it's like, ooh, you're a teacher. Fuck you.
And
die of fucking dick cancer.
Did fitness play like any part in like the way that you wanted to bring your kids up? Because I think like most of us,
No.
It didn't.
100% no.
Okay.
I wanted my children to be decent human beings. I didn't want my kids to be world-class athletes. My one is, but that's because she chose to do that.
Yeah.
I don't believe in impressing my worldview on anyone. Anyone. Just like religion. Like people raise their children to be a religion. I find that offensive. Not that they have a religion, that they impressed it on somebody before they had the ability to make a decision for the fucking selves. If my children happen to, like me, share no religion. But if my middle daughter decided she was whatever, I'd be like, amazing. Explain it to me. I'd love to know about it. Yeah. And again, my children chose athletics other than ones that I chose. Because they chose them. I didn't choose them for them. I'm not one of these fucking fat, flat-ass fucking soccer dads out there demanding that their kid be good at whatever the fuck they weren't good at. Fuck them.
Yeah.
I have another question.
All right.
You'll probably not like it, but that's okay. I like asking questions.
Just so you know, I'm just,
Nah, you just fucking
fan-fucking-tastically comfortable.
Yeah, it's a comfortable couch. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could just,
Just
have
melting
a
into
poker
it.
in the ass, this would be perfect.
Let's organize. I'll order one. Let's get it done.
Enough.
You talked about what you're teaching your children, like the very basic things are very easy for you to teach. You can do in 20, 30 minutes. But I'm curious about how do you cultivate or do you even want to? I don't know. How do you, if you want to, cultivate some of the other principles and lessons, like the level of commitment and tenacity and to work hard at things? How do you think about that? Do you care about cultivating that in your children?
Insofar as, because my children were home all day, they saw me all day.
So it's osmosis, just
So
being in the
they
environment.
had the opportunity to see how I engage. They also had the opportunity to not do that. And I have 3 children, and they all chose different levels of that. Because again, I'm not trying to make mini me's. To be honest, I wouldn't wish me on many people.
Nah, that's a lot.
Trying to make functional people. The purpose of, in my opinion, my version of the world, the purpose of parenthood is to make people that can survive without you. I believe that I have done that.
So there aren't any particular values, traits.
No, I
that you
find
believe
that
are-
horrifically arrogant. Again, I was born in 1971. My formative years were the 1980s. 1980s skills don't parlay today. Why would I want them to be like me? I want you to be at least a generation out of date. That's fucking retarded. Literally on a base level. People have this arrogance that they're so awesome, the world should have more of this shit. Fuck!
So what made you have children?
Relentless humping.
Don't worry about the protection, kids.
By the way, no PCT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really? Cool.
You fucking kidding me?
Yeah, who needs that?
So, like, over the last 8 years, you've built a pretty big tribe now, by the looks of it.
Oh, God, don't use that word.
Oh yeah, he
Oh,
hates
no,
the
we
word
hate the
tribe.
word tribe.
I said that with him,
Don't
and he
use that word.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
man.
What, are we throwing fucking sticks at each other? Jesus Christ, running around. Oh, I'll get the fire.
Gang?
At least that's mildly more civilized, but
We could say
Can't-
group.
can't-
we could just...
can't we just be people, a collective,
yeah.
an organization, a business? Like, it is the 21st century. Are we really smearing fucking ink on our face and peeking at each other through the fronds? A fucking tribe? Oh my God.
We're going to put the ink away. We're going to do that later for training.
Yeah, we'll
get rid of
go
that.
around. Yeah. Ooh, ha, ha.
So look, okay, you're surrounded by a lot of coaches. You know what I mean? A lot of athletes, a lot of people that have found you in the last 8 years. And I'm not too sure. Was I the one who put you on to Broderick for your other podcast when you guys spoke a couple of years back?
It was your boy, Dr. Mike Rizatel. He made a brief mention
Gotcha.
of you, and that put me on your radar. Then you were kind enough to come on my podcast
So
for some
anyway,
crazy reason.
You've been on a lot of our radars for a long time now, and I would say you've been so giving with all of this content, and I know that you've been. There was a time when you weren't monetizing any of it, right? There's a bit of a story there, and all of us are sitting there going, "Why is this guy not charging for this content? This is ridiculous." So we're all very happy for you that you are monetizing it, and if anyone isn't a subscriber to your site, I would highly recommend it because it has an insane amount of content that you do on there. But I just wanted to ask you, obviously you tour every year.
Give or take.
Yeah. Have you got any plans over the next couple of years to do anything beyond what you're doing now, or are you very content and fulfilled with how the business looks now?
I'm not. How do I answer that? One, I am never content on a base level. I just walk around perpetually annoyed at everything. At everything. I am literally annoyed at the way the wind blows. I'm annoyed at the blueness of the sky. There's just so many things that just don't sit well with me. So am I content? Absolutely not. However, the real problem is literally directly related to what I just said to him. My world was constructed in a time before the internet, in a time before social media, in a time before man buns and skinny jeans. I literally do not know what the current iteration of this requires. Hopefully, some of the people you've mentioned in my sphere will steer me in a direction that is changing, at least semi-relevantly to what's needed. Am I capable of answering what that is to you? Absolutely not. I literally will be as surprised as everyone else when I get there because I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Classic. Yeah. So you don't have an idea or a vision of what you want the future to look like? You take it one day at a time? Because you've accomplished quite a bit. You may not think so, but
I think you're asking about like do I have a business plan? Do I have an end game? Do I have a retirement
just
plan?
progression, like progressive overload for your life.
No, and that's unfortunately is why I'm very good and also why I'm horrifically stunted.
Yeah.
Is that everyone looks at me very much as though, oh my God, he's the expert. He knows more about steroids than almost anyone, and And the reality is, I wake up every morning and just say, fuck, the number of things I don't know is so much bigger than the number of things I do know about my chosen field. Not like the fucking capital of Rwanda. Like, literally, like, there are so many things. When I give speeches about steroids, I'll often say, for reasons. And I'll be like, and the reasons are, I don't fucking know. And then, for reasons, this happens. One day I'll figure out what those reasons are. There's enough of those that if I live another 100 years, there'll still be enough of those left over.
And do you still get time throughout your week to go and look at those, to
100%.
research? Yeah. So with everything else you got going on right now, that's still a big part, that drive to learn and you making time for that.
Literally, I am in Australia. I'm in Melbourne, Australia. I brought 3 textbooks with me from the United States to read in the Airbnb, in the cars, in the fucking buses. Yes.
Yeah.
That seems like the mission, the purpose. Like what? I don't know if you believe in just why. It's like if you're a machine and robot, that is your task to do. Constantly pursue more and learn more. That's what I'm hearing.
I've chosen that. I don't believe in destiny or any sort of preordained.
You choose to,
but I have made that the reason to continue on each and every day is because there's shit I haven't figured out yet.
You talk about. I'm going to ask you a philosophical question. You talk about like every day you wake up, it's like holy shit, hallelujah, right? Do you care if you die? Are you afraid of death?
Oh, I'm certainly not.
Okay.
No.
Are you afraid of dying?
No.
So do you...
Again, that's one of those good, I don't know what question you're asking.
Well, they're different things.
Do I want it to be unpleasant? No, I don't have a masochistic streak. Like, gee, I hope I suffocate slowly. Like, no. But in the same breath, not being able to get up and learn new shit tomorrow will be on one hand disappointing, but on another hand, be rather refreshing.
Yeah.
I don't quite know how to answer that, and I think my thoughts on that genuinely offend most people. But there are days when my frustration level reaches a point where I almost wish it was the last day.
What frustrates you the most?
People.
Yeah. Like me.
Absolute lack of commitment to thought and articulation and precision. Like I just find people so flaccid and bereft. Who's
the opposite to that you've seen, learned from, researched, who does such an exceptional job at that?
They're all over the place. They're all over the place. Athletes in sports that I don't even like. There's the Tiger Woods. There's whatever that idiot basketball idiot was.
LeBron? Michael Jordan?
Yeah, that one. there are things that I don't care about, but there are things that they obviously care about. Somewhere there's a dude that juggles penguins perfectly. Like, that guy's awesome. Like, that's awesome. The fact that somebody took the time to master a thing in a way that God himself couldn't, like, that is amazing. It isn't the what, it's the how. I'm sure you want something a little different. Like,
I just want honesty.
Richard Feynman is an example of somebody that applied their intellect in a way that was dangerous. Literally, when you go to the zoo, well, I say that, again, I'm a biologist. Maybe people don't see what I see when I go to the zoo, but we went to the Melbourne Zoo. And when I see an animal, I see its animal. When I look at a lion, I don't go, ooh, it's big, and it's like, I see, holy fuck. If it was just me and that lion, how would I fare? And the answer is poorly. I see danger. I see that animal's danger. In humans, we are physically shit. We're weak, we're slow, we're small, we're soft, we're bipedal, we're bullshit in the animal world. Our danger is our intellect. Some people carry more danger than others. Someone like Richard Feynman would have been dangerous. In a room full of people, he would have been the one that everyone should have feared.
So I gotta ask. It seems kind of funny to me. Like, you have like this. What drives you is this, like, you want to learn and you want to apply, right? And your business is people that frustrate you the most as well. Are there days where you wake up where you think, like what keeps you connected to coming back to people, which is the business and that, but which is also what frustrates you the most? Is it the training? Is it the fitness? Is it this thing that, like, you're so personally passionate about as well that you can kind of, like, put up with the people as part of the process?
I don't actually have an answer for that.
Do you ever wake up and think of...
That might actually be yet another piece of my mental illness. It might be that my far better answer would be to just close the door and go my office and close the door and not come out. That might be a far better answer for me. I don't know. But for whatever reason, I lack that capacity.
Yeah. Well, for so many researchers, scientists and stuff like that, they wouldn't choose a job like this, like a surrounding of people like this, because of some of those frustrations that you're saying. You would know that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you do.
Yep.
And I'm like, what? I can kind of understand what you're saying to a certain degree as well. I just feel like I'm trying to think, what is the thing that sort of ties you to that?
I honestly can't say. That's a level of self-introspection that I lack. I've never been officially diagnosed for many reasons, most of them probably socioeconomic, but and apathy for sure. But I'm sure that I am Asperger's or some fucking thing.
Yeah.
And
the reason I ask is because I find, like, I remember back in competing days, being in good shape and being at the gym, and like this old guy coming up to me at one of the gyms and just kind of like starting up a conversation. And this guy would have been in his late 60s at the time, but he was just like leather skin, wiry. He'd been at it. And we started talking. It was like talking to someone my age, like mid-30s and stuff like that. And it's just one of those things that you find that, like, fitness kind of brings people together, on that kind of common ground, in spite of other things, like whether it's age or whether it's like some of the frustrating things that,
Yeah, I don't find that. I find that, but I don't find it with fitness. Rarely. As a matter of fact, I typically have things in common with athletes in spite of. It's not... we both squat and deadlift, but I still think they're a fucking dipshit. No. I typically have those sorts of connections with the very random. The guy doing graffiti on a street sign. The person who makes me the perfect cup of coffee. I find that more with acts than commonality of, we both do we're in the same tribe. No. My tribe's I'm a tribe of one. I'm going to murder you in his sleep. Nope. Yeah. We're not in a tribe.
So you're
but I occasionally stumble off someone who has a level of commitment to a thing that's admirable.
Yeah.
I literally had that happen. I did a fucking seminar yesterday at a gym, and 2 blocks down the street was a coffee shop. And there was a woman there who literally labored to make a cup of coffee. It was, to her momentary ability, as perfect as it could be. It was aligned with the fucking cosmos. That's admirable.
Yeah.
That level of precision, as petty as a cup of coffee is, it could even be, and I love coffee, so that's extra amazing. But it could have been a bowl of fucking beans. It doesn't matter. It matters that it was done with the utmost ability of the human fucking genome. That's what matters. That's what matters.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe this industry does give you more exposure to some of those people. Not that you mentioned them. You mentioned a graffiti artist and a coffee maker, a barista. But maybe it does. Maybe with the athletes you get to see, that they're like in that pursuit of excellence, you can,
Most athletes aren't in pursuit of excellence. They're in pursuit of glory. That's not the same thing at all. I would have been happy to be the best squatter in the world in my garage. Never tell anybody.
Yeah.
Glory is a sociological thing. Excellence is a thing. They're not even remotely similar. They're interchangeable in the slightest.
Yeah, I like that.
There's a guy in India. I'm going to butcher his name. Ramanai, back in the 1800s, who literally lived in a hut and created, personally, singly, of his own hands, all of mathematics. He never went to a Western school. He never learned Newtonian mechanics. He literally created it from nothing, independently. Lived and died and never fucking told anyone. That's excellence.
Mm-mm.
He didn't create it to run off and tell people. He created it because in his mind, it needed to be created. That's excellence. That is quite literally the definition of the word. That is excellent. That's what that fucking word means. Why we have that word. It's why once upon a time a Smith created that word, is to represent that fucking thought.
Yeah.
That's what you pursue, in a way?
I hope
Or attempt to?
I hope to. I aspire to.
Yeah.
Personally, I probably fail far more often than I succeed.
Yeah. Nevertheless, you'll get further by attempting than not. I wanted to ask, let's take a left turn to TRT.
It is.
So a lot of younger people in their 20s who are utilizing TRT to support their quality of life. What should they be aware of for the side effects of using standalone TRT?
They should be aware that their worldview is just poor.
To only use TRT?
No, just in general.
Okay.
First of all, the language side effects.
Trade-off,
Now,
perhaps.
the language side effects is a helpful euphemism. We use it to nomenclate what we don't like. It's like weeds. Did the hand of God come down and say, these plants are beautiful, these plants are weeds? No, they're photosynthetic fucking plants. All plants are plants. Humans decided that some are to be prized and decided some are lesser. There's no such thing as weeds. There is no such thing as weeds. There are plants. There are less favorable plants, but they're plants nonetheless. There's no such thing as side effects. Drugs do things. Some of the things we like, some of the things we don't like. Drugs do things. Full stop. Move on to the next chapter. So Should people be aware that drugs do some things they don't like? Sure. Is the language side effect or skewing their entire worldview to this idea that if you just pay enough money or invest in enough something that you can curtail that side effect? I don't know. I would say yes.
So then, in specific to TRT only,
Right?
what are they?
What are the things drugs do across the board? Those drugs develop secondary male characteristics. They develop muscle mass. They change the psyche to a more adult male predisposition. They have the potential to convert to estrogen. They have the potential to convert to DHT. They have the potential to skew lipid profile.
What is the potential to increase, for TRT only, to increase mortality and increase general disease risk?
Well, let's start with a different question. What's the number one indicator of mortality?
Body composition?
Body weight. Not even body composition, body weight. Body composition second.
Okay.
The number one indicator of mortality in all mammalian species is mass. The bigger the animal, whether it be muscular or fat, the larger the animal, the shorter the lifespan within interspecies.
Yep.
So you're taking a drug that's most likely going to make you heavier. Is that going to raise or lower your mortality?
Raise. Right.
Work that out for yourself.
Sure.
Okay. Now, the second best indicator of mortality is composition. Is it going to improve that? Probably. So again, you got to work out the trade-off for yourself.
Do you like using the fat-free mass index?
No,
Because?
because that deals with people, and I don't like people.
Okay. Who would you rather deal with?
Again, I'm dealing with people that are committed. I'm dealing with people that you say like this has a. If I said this is the only way to get to your goal, but it has a 70% mortality rate, they would say, and therefore a 70% survival rate. Let's go. I'm not dealing with people that give a flying fuck about quality of life or longevity. I'm dealing with people that have a purpose. I don't know that makes me right, wrong, better, or worse than anyone else. It makes me specialized. And I do my goddamnedest to not move outside of my specialization. One, because I don't think it's appropriate. And two, because I don't even want to squander my skills on the lesser.
Fair enough.
So do you look after your nutrition with your clients?
Not all of them, but many. Most.
Okay. You do, yeah. Yeah. Training as well?
Not all of them, but many.
Okay. Yeah. So like, like across the board, your consultative and coaching work still resembles looking after the pharmaceuticals, looking after nutrition, and looking after the training, foremost.
Yeah, well, they're so deeply integrated, I almost don't see them as individual things.
Yeah. No, yeah. No, the reason I ask is like when you were talking about fat-free mass and you're like, you don't, didn't want to deal with that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's just it's different because you have to from our perspective, we ask questions to think about the variety of different demographics that could be listening, but from your perspective, those demographics are irrelevant
100%,
to you.
100%.
They are not important to the conversation. There's the
From my perspective, again.
Your perspective, your experience.
You're talking now about Einsteinian relativity. From where they're sitting, what I might say is wildly interesting and important. And they may stand on their toes to peek over the fence, and that's cool. That's their perspective. But do I have anything directly to interject to them? No.
Yeah, sure.
Should they? Could they? May they extract something from me? Fine. That's a fair and equal exchange.
Yeah. When go.
I was just going to say you're far more specialized than I realized. With
Yeah.
the clientele that you work with. Yeah. And do you still keep yourself busy on that front, like consultatively coaching? Like, is your
I turn away 50% of the people that approach me.
yeah,
Maybe more.
Because of the level of commitment that you say is not there?
And or the fact that I can only be equally committed to a finite number.
Right. You can only stretch yourself out.
I could make 3 times the amount of money I do, but it would be at the expense of doing a poorer job.
and obviously, like we mentioned before, you still got a lot of time in your week to, well, not a lot, but a time that you allocate towards all this research and this learning. Do you ever spend time outside of the focal areas of, what we know you as with your research, like stuff that you may never implement, but it's just like, takes your fancy, you've got to know it?
Quantum mechanics,
What interests you about that?
everything. The sheer fact that the world could work that way. The fact that the world can work a way that is obfuscated to you is fascinating. When you look at a thing, you think you understand how it works. You think you see this is solid. This is gravity pulls things down. You think you understand. Light is bright, but it's not a thing. And when you actually look under you open Schrodinger's box and you realize there's shit in there that you had no idea, and it's doing things you had no idea. That to me is fascinating. That this can be such a good device for navigating the world, yet so utterly opaque to what's really going on.
And do you ever find, like, you mentioned before when you were talking about the learning, I can't remember, the context of the conversation, but it was about if you're struggling or you're frustrated or there's an obstacle in the learning that you would kind of shift laterally, right? Do you find that, like, learning outside the lane that you spend most of the time in, like, has that transfer, you know what I mean, with, like, helping you back in the lane?
Sadly, the example I used of quantum mechanics, really no, because nothing in the world works like quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
People try to equate it. Oh, it's like billiard balls, or it's like that. No, it's not. It's not. It's not. It's not at all. It's a different thing entirely. It's literally, if you spent your whole life speaking a Latin language and you suddenly tried to learn some obscure, unspoken language that hasn't existed in thousands of years, it's like that. It's just so different. It's just a new thing.
Yeah. Cool.
Broderick, I like asking the question. There's a lot of younger people listening to this. It's not a good question for you. It's not. So I'm going to try and phrase it in a way that you can tolerate without exploding. Maybe framing it with your children. Did you ever give advice to your children growing up that you think could apply to creating a fully committed, dedicated human being towards excellence?
So generically and subtly, it's probably not relevant to what you're asking. But yes, my youngest daughter, my middle daughter is a martial artist. She has 3 black belts, I think, 3 black belts. My youngest daughter is developing her art skills. She's, I think in her mind, already a professional artist. And both of those things happened organically, with the save the exception of whenever the conversation of what will you be when you grow up, or what do I want to be, or how do I know what I want to be, or whatever. And my answer was always, you'll know when you know. It's like who you marry. You'll know when you know.
What is that feeling? For you.
Fear.
Fear.
100%.
Of
not having that.
Wow.
Until you encounter something that you fear losing, you don't have anything valuable. That's how you know who you're going to marry. When you meet somebody and you can't bear to go around the corner and be out of their sight, that's who you're going to marry. Or at least who you're going to pursue.
And similar could be said for the profession, the field that you dedicate yourself
100%.
to.
When I close a chemistry book and go in the other room, I'm afraid somebody's taking it. I'm afraid something's happening to it. I mean, there's shit in there I haven't absorbed yet.
Yeah.
I fear for the safety of that book.
I think that's a great place to close this conversation, unless you have anything else.
Yeah, man. No, I was. That was great. That was great.
Thank you,
Some really good
Broderick.
takeaways.
Thank you for the time.
Of course.
I appreciate it. Because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So I appreciate you. This is 51 years old.
Yeah, happy birthday for yesterday,
Yeah.
man.
Thank
We
you.
very much appreciate you spending the last day in Australia here with us.
Thank you, bro. Do you have any last comments, thoughts, angry meanderings that you want to give to the people?
No, I don't think that's my role.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, thank you for taking the time, my friend. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
It's very good to meet you in person.